Hey guys, welcome into the 14. I'm Nick Cole, and we have been breaking down every SEC football game in the 2021 season from a betting perspective. And today we get to talk about the SEC championship game, which has the SEC West champions, Alabama Crimson Tide, facing off against the SEC East champion, Georgia Bulldogs. This game's going to be played on Saturday, December 4th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, and it's going to be televised on CBS. From a betting perspective, this game opened with Georgia as a 6.5-point favorite, and it is holding true as of the recording of this video. The over-under in this game opened at 50.5, and it is down to 49.5 as we record this one. I'll bring in our betting analyst, Christopher Smith. Christopher, this is the ultra rare occurrence of Alabama being an underdog.
Yeah, that's right. Alabama has actually been favored in 92 consecutive games entering this one, and in 164 out of the last 165. And, people didn't really record betting lines back in the early 70s and before then. And I don't know if they existed much before then for every single college game all the time. But sort of in the modern recorded history of betting, Alabama's streak currently and then the streak they did have are the two longest by far. And actually, the last time they had this big long streak, they were a 1-point underdog at Georgia, and they won 38-10, playing Georgia again in this one. And Nick Saban is 4-1 outright in Alabama's last 5 spots as an underdog. So definitely historically rare to see this, but also in the last 2 spots that Alabama was an underdog, and the other spot was 2009 in the SEC championship game. You have to go back to Saban's 3rd season. Those 2 spots were very, very slight underdog situation. So now seeing Alabama maybe going to be up to a 7-point underdog by the time we get to kickoff, or flirting with it at least, is very significant. But before we figure out how we're going to make money on the game, Nick, why don't you tell us about the weather for this one, and as well as the injuries and Nick's news and notes?
Sure. So let's set the stage for this big championship game. Start with the weather. We've got temperatures in the 60s with wind between 5 and 7 miles per hour in Atlanta on Saturday afternoon. However, we point out that Mercedes-Benz Stadium has a retractable roof. The roof was open for the week 1 games that were played there. We've been sort of watching to see if they're going to, publicize whether they're going to close this roof or keep it open for the championship game on Saturday. That's something to watch for as the game time approaches. We haven't been able to find a definitive answer as we're recording this video, but maybe they'll say something that obviously if the roof's closed, we don't have any weather concerns. But otherwise, just keep a quick eye. I would assume that anything nasty blowing in from a weather standpoint, they'll go ahead and close that thing up. So we shouldn't have too much to worry about there. On the injury side of things, let's start with Georgia first. According to our friends over at Dog Nation, we've got several players that have already been ruled out for the Bulldogs. I'll run through that list really quickly. It's wide receiver Arian Smith, safety Tyke Smith, linebacker Tresman Marshall, linebacker Ryan Davis, cornerback Jalen Kimber, tight end Eric Albert, outside linebacker Adam Anderson, and guard Tate Rutledge. Safeties Christopher Smith, left tackle Jamari Sawyer, wide receiver Kearis Jackson, wide receiver Justin Robinson, and running back Kendall Milton are all questionable for this game. So those are the names you're going to want to watch as they suit up and get into warmups on Saturday. On the Alabama side of things, running backs Roydell Williams, Kamar Wheaton, and Jace McClellan are out for the season. That leaves starting running back Brian Robinson Jr. in the spotlight here. He has a pulled muscle, and as of midweek, it was unclear if he'd be able to play in this game. It's been much publicized over the last few weeks, the depth issues Alabama has at running back, and they've been leaning on Robinson heavily. So that's obviously a huge one to watch for in the hours coming up before this game. Cornerback Jalen Armour Davis missed the Iron Bowl with a hip injury. It's another guy to watch for. Center Darian Dalcourt is day-to-day. Wide receiver / punt returner JoJo Earl has missed several games in a row now. And outside linebacker Christopher Allen is out. Like I said, let's set this stage before we get some betting analysis. Beyond the obvious goal of being the SEC champions, both of these teams have something really important to play for, meaningful in this championship game. On the Georgia side of things, Georgia's been the consensus number 1 team in the college football playoff rankings since they started coming out mid-season. And so they should be safe to be included in the college football playoff Final Four, whether they win or lose this game. But for them, it's about completing a perfect season. The Dogs haven't had an undefeated season since the 1980 magical run with Vince Dooley that led to a national championship. That's obviously the last national championship in Athens. I don't need to remind Georgia fans of that. But it's also a chance to secure an SEC championship after failing to do so in their last two appearances in Atlanta. They lost in 2019 to LSU and in 2018 to Alabama. Of course, Kirby and the Dogs did win in 2017 against Auburn, but they missed last year's game as Florida won the SEC East. So this is a chance to return and maybe successfully claim the SEC title for the first time in a few years. On the Alabama side of things, it's a much more serious situation, I would say. They're in a win and you're in, lose and you're out, most likely scenario when it comes to the college football playoff. The Tide overcame some really long odds in the Iron Bowl. They were at one point, ESPN had them as a 99% chance to lose that game, down 10-0 in the fourth quarter, came back, tied that game. We all saw it. They won in quadruple overtime, 24-22, to keep their chances alive coming into this game. But now you look at it, and they're number 3 in the college football playoff rankings, and they're looking at a range of anywhere from coming out of this game with a win and being potentially the number 1 team seeded in this Final Four, to losing this game and dropping out of the top 7 or 8, depending on how they look. So a lot on the line there. What it's really going to come down to if they lose this game is how Michigan performs in the Big Ten championship game, how Cincinnati performs in their championship game, and how Oklahoma State performs in the Big 12 championship. Something to watch for. A couple things I'll point out, Christopher, before I hand it over to you to give everybody their betting analysis. Starting on the Alabama side, they really limped through November. They were 4-0. But all 3 of the SEC games that they played were decided in the final moments of the game and by a touchdown or less. They beat LSU 20-14 and had a chance to actually have lost that on a final play. LSU throwing a ball into the end zone that got knocked down. Beat Arkansas 42-35 in a game that could have gone either way. It was down to an onside kick late. And as we just mentioned, went to 4 overtimes with Auburn in a game that they had all but lost and snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. But I would point out that Alabama still shows up big time in Atlanta. The Tide is 16-1 in the Dome, where, going back to the Georgia Dome or Mercedes-Benz Stadium there under Nick Saban. The lone loss was a 2008 game, SEC championship game against Florida, and that's all the way back. We're talking about Tim Tebow and Urban Meyer with Florida at that point. So Saban is 7-1 in SEC championship games at Alabama, and he's looking for his 8th SEC championship with the Tide. One other thing I point out about Alabama, Saban is 4-1 outright in his last 5 games as an underdog. That's dating back to 2009. And on the Georgia side of things, let's just take a minute to appreciate the dominant regular season that was for the Bulldogs. We mentioned that they've sort of been beginning to end number 1 team in the college football rankings week to week. I think there are 8 consecutive weeks, which is a school record, as the number 1 team in the AP poll. And they're averaging 40.7 points per game on offense and just allowing 6.9 points per game on defense. And in total for the season, they outscored their opponents 488-83. Really impressive. Kirby Smart's got this team rolling. Last thing I would say about them, this is Kirby's big chance to finally chase down Nick Saban. Much ado about Nick Saban's assistants not being able to beat him. Jimbo Fisher broke that streak. I think it was 24 consecutive games that he had beaten his assistants. Broke that streak earlier in the season with Alabama's lone loss, but Kirby's kind of been in a close but no cigar situation. He's 0-3 all time against Saban. He lost the national championship game in overtime to Saban and Tua Tagovailoa. In 2018, he lost the SEC championship game there in Atlanta in a game that the Bulldogs enjoyed a big lead, gave up a second half comeback to Jalen Hurts, I believe. And in 2020, he lost a regular season game in Tuscaloosa to Saban. So this is the chance. We see that he is favored in this game. Most people would say he has the better team, maybe the deeper team at this point in the season. Christopher, is this the time that we actually bet on Kirby Smart to beat the Crimson Tide?
Well, we'll see very shortly what we're betting on. But first, we mentioned already in this video the sort of unusual spot for Alabama being not only an underdog, but an underdog of nearly a touchdown. And so why is that? I mean, you already talked about, Nick, the great season that Georgia has, and that's part of it. But this Alabama team, from a personnel standpoint, is not, I would say they're not close to what they've been in the years they've won the national title. And really, there's 3 issues. The number 1 issue that Alabama has, and we've talked about this for a lot of the season, is the offensive line. I guess some Alabama fans are short-sighted when it comes to their memory and sort of asking, well, why is our offensive line so bad? We recruit 5 stars every year. How could this possibly happen? But they won the Joe Moore Award as the best offensive line in the country last year, and they lost 3 starters. 2 of them were either a first-round pick or an early second-round pick that would have been a first-round pick had he been healthy, and Landon Dickerson. And then a third that went in the 6th round that is on the Panthers roster and is active right now. And then, so they lost, 2 people who are starting as rookies in the NFL on the line, and another one who's on the roster. And then Evan Neal moved from right tackle to left tackle. So really, they were only bringing back one guy from that line that was in the same position. And also they lost their assistant coach, Kyle Flood. And, they did bring in a former NFL head coach to coach the offensive line, which made headlines, but that coach has not been a college football assistant since 2001 before this year. So another big deal. I looked at the Pro Football Focus grades this week, and Evan Neal is in the low 80s for the season. The second best offensive lineman for Alabama is then in the low 60s in the grade. So huge drop off. They basically have one really good player and 4 below average SEC starters. And that's not going to win you a national title. That's not going to help you beat Georgia. And they're also dealing with some injuries now. You mentioned Dalcourt at center. They've had 1 or 2 of their rotating pieces at right tackle kind of dealing with some stuff as well. And Georgia is not a team that's going to jailbreak and blitz you. They like to kind of wait and play just standard roles and then pounce on you when you do something, and rather than come after you and risk getting burned. But, that's a big deal. The second problem with Alabama is at running back. Nick, you already talked about the injuries there. The thing is, Alabama had 5 scholarship running backs coming into the year. And right now, 3 of them are out for the season. If Robinson can't go, that would be 4 out. And the only one left is Trey Sanders, who he's had a season-ending injury on the football field, and he's also had a life-threatening car accident as well that was also a major injury. So, a lot of media types have hinted at this, but I have not heard anybody with the guts to come out and say it, which I don't know why. It's not, scandalous or sort of shocking to say, but Robinson right now is not the same player physically that he was when he arrived at Alabama. And I don't know why that's a taboo thing to mention explicitly, but that's just the truth. And then the last problem with Alabama right now is pass coverage. They're 68th in opponent passer rating. They're 62nd in EPA per snap against the pass. And their pass rush is 50th according to the Pro Football Focus grade. So looking at how Georgia kind of stacks up with that, if you've watched Georgia at all this season, you've probably seen and heard people fall in love with Jordan Davis. He's the face of that defense, 6'6", 340. But the scary thing to me, Nick, is that if you look at the Pro Football Focus grades, which are not the be-all, end-all, but it just sort of illustrates to me the depth that Georgia's defense has. It's not a one-person show. He's actually graded out as the 4th best interior defensive lineman on Georgia's team this year. So that tells you just a little bit about how many good bodies that they have and can roll and throw at you. They can win one-on-one matchups across the entire line of scrimmage when Alabama has the ball, and combine the line with Alabama's running back issues. And, even with Robinson, there was a huge downgrade last year from Najee Harris to Robinson. That was the reason that Alabama fed Harris the ball. So even with a healthy Robinson, this is not a good situation to expect Alabama to have any success running the ball. Georgia's only given up 2 touchdowns on the ground all season. And there's also a great chance that Bryce Young will be under a lot of duress. He was running for his life against Auburn. And there's been 4 teams that have sacked Young at least 4 times. Texas A&M was one of those. They beat Alabama. The other 3 times, Alabama played 1-possession games, including those that, Nick, you mentioned when you talked about Alabama's November schedule. And then, Alabama's actually number 1 in rushing defense. So, and number 2 in yards per carry allowed. Those numbers are actually better than Georgia. So it's crazy to say this, but Alabama's run defense actually statistically is better than Georgia's right now. And Georgia runs the ball 60% of the time. And they're only 76th in EPA per snap when they run the ball. They just happen to be very committed to the run. And the way the game scripts have played out, it hasn't mattered that they haven't been especially great at it. But if you're Alabama, I think one of the things you're hoping in this game is that Kirby Smart is stubborn and runs the ball a ton and plays to the strength of the Alabama defense. Because shockingly, despite what you may think about Smart's game plans and that kind of thing, Stetson Bennett has the second best passer rating in the country. And there's no way that even Georgia fans would have guessed that a couple of years ago, early in the season, when he was an injury replacement that was sort of by necessity. And he's also running for 6.3 yards per carry. And the other scary thing about Georgia's passing game is that George Pickens played his first snaps of the season last week. So if he's healthy enough to provide anything there, that just makes Georgia that much scarier because, again, Alabama's problem on defense is their pass coverage. So, Alabama's got to hope, like I said, that Georgia runs the ball a lot and isn't effective there because in the passing game, Georgia will have a big advantage. And then on Alabama's side of the field, when they have the ball, they have to hope that their quick passing game can generate yards, but also some explosive plays because you're going to need those to score against Georgia. You're not going to put together too many 12-play drives where you execute and get 5 or 6 first downs. And the hard thing about that is that even though Georgia is top 10 in sack rate, they're not really like an attacking defense. They kind of sit back and pounce on you and make sure you don't get anything after the catch. So that's a huge challenge for young Jamison Williams and John Mechie to kind of pull a rabbit out of the hat and hit some big plays. But Nick, first, why don't you tell us who you're betting on, but also do you have any kind of post-Thanksgiving gifts for our audience out there?
Yeah, Chris, for sure. I've actually got something perfect for championship weekend for people that haven't already signed up with our partner sportsbook, Action 24/7. They've got a great deal going on for new customers. We want to offer it to you today. For a limited time, you can get your deposit matched 100% up to $800. So if you sign up today and make your first deposit using the code SOUTH14, that's SOUTH14, Action will double your money up to $800. So download the app or visit action247.com to get started. Action 24/7 is by Tennesseans for Tennesseans. You've got action. And Christopher, my action on this game, when I sat down to make a bet on this, I had to think about it this way. If you took the logos off of the helmets for both of these teams, took everything away, just looked at the raw performances that we saw, the stat sheets, the advanced analytics in some cases, I have a hard time thinking that anybody would come away and saying Alabama is the team that's going to win this game outright. And Georgia has the body of work that they've put together is just better than Alabama's this year. And usually we're talking about this the other way around, or Alabama is the team that everybody's kind of doubting, but is the more impressive resume at the end of the day. But I don't think that's the case this year. And so I'm going to lay the 6.5. It's more than I'm comfortable laying to Nick Saban in a big game, but I feel like that's the right thing to do. So I'm going to do it. So give me Georgia minus 6.5. And on the total, I think both of these defenses are kind of the strength of their programs. Obviously, we've seen offenses flash at various times for these teams. Bryce Young's thrown for 559 yards in a conference game. Georgia's averaging 40 points a game in total, but I like an old-fashioned Nick Saban versus Kirby Smart fist fight, and I think that's going to lead to a low-scoring game. So give me under 49.5 in this championship setting. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, well, that's how the game is going to have to play out for Alabama to have any chance of covering or winning outright. And I do think the biggest risk or threat to under 49.5 is Georgia's passing game hitting some explosives because Alabama's pass defense can certainly give them up. And even though that's not what you would think of when you think of Georgia as their sort of their top thing, and people were still kind of questioning pretty far into this season if they should just switch to JT Daniels still as well as Bennett has played because he's not especially known for connecting on deep explosive plays, but they've shown the ability to do that this season. So definitely want to get the hook on the 49.5 there instead of just 49 if you're going to go with the under. But I don't think it's a secret. Nick, you and I both had Georgia spread tickets locked up by the end of rivalry weekend. And so we're both on Georgia. Minus 6.5 is not as good as where we both individually got in, but it's certainly better than what it would be at a touchdown. And there's a chance that it could flirt with that. I expect before the game, a lot of casual bettors will probably be on Alabama in this spot. And this is a spot where there's actually substantial money from casual bettors because it's such a big game. But to me, the only other thing that I'm worried about outside of that like low scoring game is really two things on the Georgia side if you're betting that way. One is right now all the pressure is on Georgia. And you mentioned their record against Alabama under Kirby Smart. They've been in big SEC championship game, national title game, and kind of wet the bed late against Alabama. So I think if this gets to the fourth quarter and it is a one possession game, or Alabama, is down 10 and is driving the ball and scores a touchdown, whatever, I think the pressure is going to be all on Georgia, and we'll see if they have enough sort of fortitude to get through that and cover this game. And then the only other thing that I think is a threat to the spread is if you've watched Alabama over the years, whenever Nick Saban identifies that he's definitely doesn't have the best team, he's willing to try to, kind of stack the deck in his favor. And we saw that when he switched to Tua at halftime against Georgia in the national title game. He's not switching for Bryce Young, but we also saw him get a kick return touchdown and an onside kick in the same game in a national title that he won against Clemson. So would it be shocking to try to see a fake or an onside kick or something if this game starts playing out and Saban knows that he doesn't have the better team? He is not afraid to try something. He's not like a coach that maybe would get slammed for months to come if he tries something and it doesn't work. If he knows he's the worst team, he's not afraid to kind of take a big gamble in a game like this and try to flip sides. So I'm on Georgia -6.5 and under 49 as well. Those are the things that I think are sort of the contrary point of view if you're looking for the other side of things. But for Nick Cole, I'm Christopher Smith for the 14, and we hope you enjoy the game.